Afternoon, everybody. I'm conscious that I'm the person standing between you and a beer, so I'll try and move quickly. Just quickly about me, I head up the innovation group. I love the title CEO of Intelligence. I'm the worldwide director of the innovation group at JWT Thompson, which is JWT's in-house futures and innovation think tank. We're part research unit, we're part consultancy, and we're also a creative incubator for products and brand concepts based on the future. Everything I'm going to talk to you about today is on JWT Intelligence. We produce research throughout the year, so if you do want to check our stuff out, have a quick look. These are some of the examples of our studies. Broadly speaking, we look at cultural trends and how that's going to impact on brands. We look at consumer change, so groups such as Generation Z, and how their behavior is changing and what that means for brands, but also sector innovation. Just a quick one on our research. We don't actually invent the trends. Like, people seem to think that futurism is just something that I consult my horoscopes for every day. That really, although I do. Everything that you're going to see here today, while quite visual, is underpinned by anthropological research, ethnographic research, original data. We also make a really big point of connecting all our trends to visual culture, especially as it pertains to the product concept development that we do. So we look at visual trends with an insight lens as well. So today I'm going to talk about this subject, the political is personal. It's actually based on a study that we brought out late last year between actually Brexit and the election decision in the US, called The Political Consumer. And the theme of this talk is based on that. It's called The Political is Personal. That's actually a reference to Carol Hanisch, the 1960s feminist. She was talking about how people increasingly were viewing politics not in silos, but looking at politics through the lens of their own personal circumstances. And that really is what's happening now, a bit in new and profound ways, and being propelled by social media. We're seeing the whole landscape of dialogue around politics becoming much more vocal and propelled by social media, celebrities talking about politics for the first time, and also consumers expecting brands not just to commit social good and have cause wrapped into what they do, but increasingly have a political stance, which, as we've seen from Pepsi most recently, right, can have negative and positive consequences. So here's the study, The Political Consumer. As I said, a lot of this is about the fact that people are viewing the landscape and discourse through their own personal circumstance. You're seeing new battle lines being drawn along multiple different verticals, from generations, so millennials versus boomers, millennials being annoyed with boomers for taking all their money and keeping property prices high, ruining the planet, some would say. You have socioeconomic divides, you have gender divides, a lot of contentiousness, and all of this being very much through a personal lens. And that is creating a new set of challenges and opportunities for brands. So you're seeing the fact that brands beyond social good are starting to be required and expected to have a political point of view. So move from apartisan, let's say, to partisan, and being more bold in the way they do so. They can no longer be bystanders, especially in the post-truth era, so they're being held to account for even when their advertising becomes posted alongside untrue narratives or damaging narratives, as we've seen recently from YouTube being held to account for content and advertising being placed alongside user-generated content. They're also leading moral movements and taking more of a civic leadership. I mean, it says something about the political times that we're in, that brands are becoming thought leaders. We're looking to them to provide some moral guidance. But they all have to navigate the way they attach themselves to these causes in a very, very sophisticated way, and not seem opportunistic or cynical, which is really, really challenging. And a lot of it, I think it's really interesting that we talk about how data is increasingly the North Star that we make a lot of decisions based on. But actually, a lot of the campaigns that we're seeing that try and tap into this political zeitgeist, their success and failure actually falls on something as nuanced as taste and judgment, something very human. And actually, it's intuition as to how to connect with political causes. So in the study that is actually on JWT Intelligence, we look at new trends such as celebrities, the fact that they're becoming more politicized and more vocal, and not losing brand sponsorship, actually. Policing the police, how social media platforms have become, curiously, this sort of surveillance tool and empowerment tool. We've seen recently with airlines, for example, they've become a form of consumer protection champion in the air. civic brands, so brands having a civic cause, but also Generation Z activists. I'm sure all of you know who Generation Z are, centennials, 12 to 19-year-olds. They are perhaps the most politically activist generation to date, and are really expecting brands to engage with them on that level. And of course, millennials. Millennials, again, have been historically quite actually taken a back foot in politics. They claim to care about causes, but it's always been on quite a superficial level. But now they're actually getting much more mobilized as a result of recent political events. So the most compelling statistic to us in this report was, and this has been reflected actually top-up data that we've done in the UK, is that consumers really are expecting brands to take a political point of view. So 78% of Americans we found in this 1,000-person study, they agreed that companies should take action to address the important issues facing society. And 88% agreed that corporations have the power to influence social change. So what's creating this era of politicized and cultural dialogue? Well, of course, inequality, the fact that in many countries, the divide between rich and poor is becoming much, much bigger and exacerbated by new technologies and unemployment. Decentralized media, so the fact that user-generated content is becoming a form of citizen journalism, but also the fact that people see themselves as individual broadcasters and see themselves as brands and are feeling very free about sharing their political opinions, much, much freer than they had before. Again, in our data, we found that people were sharing much, much more of their political viewpoints than before via social channels. And identity and cultural change. So you're seeing people becoming much more politicized about that thing. Even stuff like age and generations, you're seeing, we found 50-plus consumers actually becoming really politicized about when brands were selling youth to them. They don't want to be sold youth. So the way brands even talk about age is becoming viewed in quite political terms. And of course, social media. The most telling thing about this is the role of live video. So not just Facebook Live, but live video on Twitter, for example, becoming something that not only is very powerful and viral very quickly, but seems more real. And again, something that not just consumers, but celebrities are using. Some of you might be familiar with Shailene Woodley at the Dakota Pipeline. She live streamed her arrest on social media. It was viewed 500,000 times by 500,000 people at the time. Sorry, too many coffees. But also has been seen since by 5 million people and actually had a massive impact on raising awareness of the Dakota Pipeline. I'll just show you a quick clip here.
Actress Shailene Woodley pleaded not guilty on charges related to the resistance to the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline Wednesday. She was arrested along with 27 others in North Dakota October 10th during actions to mark Indigenous Peoples Day. Woodley was strip searched and then put in an orange jumpsuit in the Morton County Jail in Mandan, which appears to be a common practice even for low-level misdemeanor charges. Shailene Woodley told...
So that's even become a tool, especially with Black Lives Matter activists as well, filming their own arrests and becoming, again, a surveillance tool. We spoke to Deborah Price, who is VP of Marketing at Unruly, which is a video tech company, and she said part of the reason that video has become such an instrumental tool is because it seems more real. There's something quite visceral and emotive about it that seems much more legitimate than just regular content. The other thing is that, apart from growing divides in audiences, they're also becoming much more openly critical of brands. So you see, for example, this was actually led by, I talked about Generation Z being very, very politicized. Marc Jacobs, in his collection late last year, included dreadlocks, mainly worn by white models on the runway. Something like that might not have picked up that much attention, or it might have irritated someone on a very personal, internalized level. But teenage influencers led a wave of criticism against Marc Jacobs for cultural appropriation, and the designer was forced to apologize. Some of you will also have seen that the Oscars, again, were called out very, very vocally by leading celebrities for being very, very not diverse. So all of this is leading towards a very politicized brand landscape. You'll see here lots of Daily Mail headlines, the favorite publication of Brits. I like the Showbiz column and the Showbiz column alone. It's a guilty pleasure, but certainly don't subscribe to the politics. But Lego, for example, has taken a stand against the Daily Mail, withdrawing all of its advertising because it goes against its philosophy of being for every child. It argued that the Daily Mail, in producing hate and promoting hate of refugee children, went against its ethos and took quite a public stand against the publication. The Super Bowl as well, which is, again, known for its advertising, actually in 2016, it was famous for having the most politicized ads to date. This is actually a highly controversial, although some would say also highly progressive if you were thinking about millennials. This was a highly controversial campaign by Budweiser.
You don't look like you're from around here.
Warum bist du aus Deutschland?
I want to brew a beer.
Welcome to America.
You're not wanted here. Go back home. Abandon ship.
Welcome to St. Louis, son.
Beer for my friend, please.
Thank you. But next time, this is the beer we drink.
Eberhard Dannheiser.
Dolphus Busch.
But Budweiser is just one of a tidal wave of brands that, especially in the wake of the Muslim ban and in response to Donald Trump, have become very vocally political. So this is a campaign by Airbnb promoting acceptance of people from all walks of life. Thinks, the underwear brand, has actually been staging dinners about the political landscape in the US and the anti-Trump stance. This is a brand campaign by Glossier, the beauty brand that was championing diversity and America's rich, diverse culture in the wake of the Women's March. And this is also the Tied Together campaign, which was supported unilaterally by the fashion industry, from business of fashion to designers like Tommy Hilfiger and On Every Runway. So brands taking quite a vivid and quite a partisan political stance. Celebrities are also becoming markedly political. So some of you might have seen Beyoncé, I think it was 2015, really caused a lot of controversy for the Super Bowl, referencing directly the black activist movement of the 60s. Again, you have celebrities not being called out and not losing brand partnerships for being very vocally political.
This award, this is not for me. This is for the real organizers all over the country, the activists, the civil rights attorneys, the struggling parents, the families, the teachers, the students that are realizing that a system built to divide and impoverish and destroy us cannot stand if we do. All right? It's kind of basic mathematics. The more we learn about who we are and how we got here, the more we will mobilize. Now, this is also in particular for the black women, in particular, who have spent their lifetimes dedicated to nurturing everyone before themselves. We can and will do better for you. Now.
So when you think back to even, that's a really big contrast from something like when Kanye West, in the wake of the Hurricane Katrina, he went on television and famously said, George Bush does not care about black people. He lost a significant amount of his brand sponsorship. Everyone stood by this guy, Jesse Williams, and he retained his role on the show. And you're getting this across the board. So Keira Knightley being part of the Don't Fuck My Future, sorry to swear, Fuck My Future campaign in response to the EU referendum. NFL players being very, very vocal about the treatment of African-American players in American society. And again, the NFL and brands staying by them. So much more openness to quite strong political points of view. But I mentioned this isn't just about mainstream politics. This is actually also about personal politics. Feminism that used to be on very much the fringes of discourse and also something that brands might have been afraid to approach is now front and center in political discourse, and brands are really trying to align with it in a way of very bold campaigns. This is actually a platform by Gen Zs called Club Clitoris. It's trying to normalize imagery of multiple different clitorises. I said clitoris, guys, I think about 5 times on a Thursday afternoon. Woo! But also having more progressive women's interest media, and women's interest media that is more female-friendly and more about female empowerment. You have Refinery 29 combining with Getty Images to create more normalized, diverse imagery of women of all shapes and sizes. This is the 67% project, based on the insight that actually 67% of women in the US are over size 14. and yet that's not reflected in media. So they not only shot a whole new catalogue of photography, they also used algorithms to make sure that this imagery became normalized within the imagery displayed on Refinery 29. So quite a bold stance. You also have brands becoming a benevolent force, so becoming almost like a charitable force. You know, the Wild West gig economy and the latest wave of new apps are apps that have a social cause wrapped into them. So Juno is actually an ethical cooperative version of Uber, where drivers are paid fairly, and it's not it doesn't abuse its workers in the way that Uber and perhaps Lyft are believed to. You have IKEA spending more than most small governments on sustainable energy and also creating things like this. This is a solar-powered shelter for refugees, which has now just been placed in the Museum of Modern Art, because it is not only beautifully designed, but it's incredibly efficient. So a brand really investing in a global international cause. You have brands like this mobile phone brand in the US, which is aimed at low-income and urban consumers. In the run-up to the US election, it actually gave over its stores for political polling stations. That's the first time a brand has ever championed a political cause in such a direct way and encouraged voting. There's also the notion of politics and benevolence about where you produce stuff. So Shinola has famously made reinventing and restoring Detroit to prominence as a manufacturing hub, as one of its real central causes. It also recently led with a campaign celebrating America's diversity, and that being part of American roots. But we see that also becoming important to consumers. I think the most important stat here is, and it's reflected in our European data, is over half of UK respondents said recently that they prefer buying local brands because they support local businesses, which help the economy. So even where brands are producing stuff has become somewhat politicized. You also have brands, if they're not aligning with a cause in a very direct way, becoming supporters of causes and movements to solve change in a positive way. So this is actually a JetBlue campaign that was offering Democrats and Republicans on a plane a free ticket to anywhere they wanted to go if the whole plane could agree on the right place to go. So they decided Costa Rica, and they came together, and then they got a free flight, despite differences in their political allegiances. Starbucks, of course, made, in the wake of the Muslim ban in the US, made a big political stance about saying it was going to hire 100,000 refugees in the US, which was, again, quite divisive, but won over some key advocates. But has also launched a new original TV series celebrating people who create positivity in their community. Again, it continues. So you have Dior supporting feminism. You have this H&M-owned brand called Moki, again, celebrating awareness of female and bringing a new frank dialogue to women's issues such as periods. MTV has created a campaign called the 67%, I can't read it there, the 73% work clock, championing the idea or raising awareness about the fact that women earn a much lower percentage on the dollar of income in the US and income disparity between US and UK. Again, sometimes this is actually getting quite confrontational and uncomfortable. This is a fashion designer, Priya Moss, who sent down the catwalk at New York Fashion Week in October, brands splattered in, clothing splattered in blood, again highlighting the plight of Black Lives Matter. You're also seeing brands becoming radically inclusive as a political stance. So this is Donna Key trying to take a more multifaceted view of the Hispanic consumer. You know, when you think about how Hispanic consumers are presented in media, it's often quite a binary way or quite a limited or stereotypical way. That's something that they've really taken a stance against. This next video is also by Shea Moisture, talking about the lack of diversity, not only in the way products for African Americans are retailed, but also the way that they are presented in media.
We just have been conditioned to go to the corner and find our spot where we've been placed.
There is a section called ethnic, and there is an aisle called beauty.
To be honest, we've dealt with it our whole lives to the point of internalizing it. Do I feel like I'm beautiful?
It's ethnic, not beautiful.
When I go to the beauty aisle, I feel secluded and out of place.
It's been frustrating. This is just the way it is.
How can I break down those walls?
are Shea Moisture, and now we can be found in the beauty aisle, where we all belong.
You're seeing that only continue. So you're seeing brands and media becoming much more proactively diverse because, frankly, consumers are calling them out. Again, along the lines of age, along the lines of race. This is Be Beautiful LA, which is a blog championing and trying to create more positive and multifaceted imagery celebrating black women. And really, when you look ahead, this is really only going to continue. Brands are really going to be expected to really think about all of these issues much more seriously when you consider that Generation Zs, as I said, are the most political generation to date and politically activist. So just to recap, they're 12 to 19-year-olds. They're the most diverse to date. They are highly conscious and critical consumers. They're also showing radically different attitudes towards gender and sexuality and are expecting brands to keep up. Again, unlike millennials who were somewhat superficial in their engagement with causes, Generation Z will actually do something about it. They will call your brand out. They called out Marc Jacobs. They'll launch a charity. They will go after you. They're also coming out to vote in record numbers. So in the Scottish referendum, actually, 80% of the Gen Zs who were allowed to vote for the first time came out to vote. But you also see that in their media and the media consumption. And they use the commonality, the common thread with all of the brands that they're consuming is that they have somewhat of a social cause baked in. This is School of Doodle, a new platform which is aimed at teenage girls. It has a cause baked into it. It's feminist. It has spoken word poetry. It also has political coverage inside of it. You know, when I was in my teen years, I used to spend my time watching Dawson's Creek marathons. So really quite a departure from what we might have thought about teenagers before. I'll just show you this little clip of them.
Doing your part is being authentic to yourself. Doing your part is being brave.
Today, the movement of my body is simply one body in a movement. A movement where paintbrush kisses skyline, charcoal pencil sculpts future, and notebooks breathe, themselves living organisms.
So you might have noticed the loud word part. That was about reclaiming loud as a positive thing for girls. Another point of that platform is to provide a platform for African-American teenagers to share their art because their stance is that that has historically been undervalued and undershown. But you see that across the board with Gen Z. So this is Heb Jamal, who's a Muslim activist and has been taking part and leading movements in the US against immigration bans. You have influencers such as Troye Sivan raising awareness of LGBT issues. In fact, across the board, when you look at the celebrities even that Gen Zs love, they all have a political or social justice thread. And this is Zendaya, of course, but you also have people like Miley Cyrus and Lorde. All of them have got some sort of social justice or social cause attached to what they do, and that's become hugely important to Gen Zs. Even media, so when you consider Teen Vogue used to be known for boyfriend guides, maybe shopping guides, quizzes about beauty. Now it's become one of the leading political publications in the US. This is a thing from Teen Vogue, a page from Teen Vogue, but it's become very, very politicized in its messaging. So my time is up, and now it's time for beers for you guys. But I'll just recap. One of the 5 key things that are really important when considering this movement. So do have a point of view. It really is important now for brands to have a point of view on this stuff, even if it is to generally be positive and contribute something positive. But do it responsibly and collaboratively. One of the biggest things we're seeing is that if you behave in a cynical way, you are getting called out too. Could your brand be a force for good? Could you be a benevolent brand? Consider that politics is now everything. It's not just about partisan politics. It's about race, it's about gender, it's about age, it's about where you live, it's about where you produce. And make way for the Gen Z activists, because they're going to come after your brand if you don't behave well. Thanks very much.